Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go to my review of WCW's Starrcade 1993. Starting off the evening, we go to our first match of the night. It is a tag team matchup. It is Paul Orndorff and Paul Roma versus Too Cold Scorpio and Marcus Bagwell. I thought this was a good match to start Starrcade 93. Back and forth matchup between both teams with Too Cold Scorpio and Bagwell keeping the pace of the match. The masked assassin then puts something in his mask. He ends up using that, hits Too Cold Scorpio when the referee is distracted. Orndorff then goes for a cover, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Paul Orndorff and Paul Roma. Hats off to Paul Orndorff and Paul Roma for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the Shockmaster versus Awesome Kong. I thought this was an okay match. Back and forth matchup between the Shockmaster and Awesome Kong, with the Shockmaster ultimately hitting a scoop slam, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is the Shockmaster. Hats off to the Shockmaster for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WCW Television Championship. It is Steven Regal versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between Regal and Steamboat, with Regal keeping the pace of the match. But this match between Regal and Steamboat ultimately ends in a time limit draw, and Steven Regal retains the WCW Television Championship. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is another tag team matchup. It is Tex Slazenger and Shanghai Pierce versus Max Payne and Cactus Jack. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with Max Payne and Cactus Jack keeping the pace of the match, with Cactus Jack hitting his signature double arm DDT on Shanghai Pierce, pins him for the 3, and your winners of the match are Max Payne and Cactus Jack. Hats off to Max Payne and Cactus Jack for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a 2 out of 3 falls match for the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship. It is Dustin Rhodes versus Stunning Steve Austin. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between Rhodes and Austin, with Rhodes keeping the pace of the match. Rhodes hits a power slam on Austin in the middle of the ring. Rhodes then throws Austin over the ropes. Referee ends up seeing this. Austin wins the first fall by disqualification. And then Austin ultimately hits a roll-up on Dustin Rhodes, pins him for the 3. And your winner of the match, and at that time new WCW United States Heavyweight Champion, is Stunning Steve Austin. Hats off to Stunning Steve Austin for getting the win in that match, and at that time becoming the new WCW United States Heavyweight Champion. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WCW International Heavyweight Championship. It is Rick Rude versus The Boss, a.k.a. Big Boss Man. I thought this match was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Rude and Boss, with Rude keeping the pace of the match. But Rude ultimately hits a roll-up on the Boss, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Rick Rude. Hats off to Rick Rude for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It's a tag team matchup. It is the Nasty Boys versus Hawk and Sting. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with the Nasty Boys keeping the pace of the match. Missy Hyatt gets involved in this match, ends up attacking Sting. And your winners of the match by disqualification are Road Warrior Hawk and Sting. Hats off to Road Warrior Hawk and Sting for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our main event of Starrcade 1993. It is for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. It is Vader defending the championship against the Nature Boy Ric Flair. I thought this was a great match. Back and forth matchup between Flair and Vader, with Flair landing devastating chops on Vader in the ring. Vader then unloads strikes in the corner on Flair. It looked absolutely brutal. Vader then hits a press slam on Flair in the middle of the ring. Harley Race then attacks Flair ringside. The referee doesn't see it. Flair, though, was keeping the pace of the match, with Flair ultimately hitting a roll-up on Vader. Pins him for the 3. And your winner of the match, and at that time new WCW World Heavyweight Champion, is the Nature Boy Ric Flair. couple of things I'm gonna say about Starrcade 1993 before I get out of here, man. Number one, and I stated this in the past, man. Starrcade to me, and I was a huge WCW fan growing up as a kid, man. I was a huge fan of WCW. I love the product that they had and some of the wrestlers that came through WCW. It's a fantastic product, man, that, WCW put together. But, to me, Starrcade was WCW's WrestleMania. Now, it might not have been in April or anything else like that. I believe even back in the day, some of the WrestleManias were actually in March. But usually, 9 times out of 10, Starrcade was usually on as a pay-per-view either between the months of November or December. But to me, Starrcade for WCW was always their WrestleMania. I mean, Starrcade always put on, top matches. Always. But with that being said, this Starrcade I felt like was a little lackluster, man, in my honest opinion. And literally the entire Starrcade 93 was just, pretty much a build up to the main event. With that being said, in the duration throughout the night, everybody was talking about Vader and everybody was talking about Ric Flair. Now, in the beginning of the show, you can see Mean Gene Okerlund, rest in peace to Mean Gene, in the limousine with Ric Flair talking about this upcoming match that Flair is going to have against the Mastodon, the World Heavyweight Champion, Vader. And how, if Flair were to lose this matchup, this could be the last match of his career, and so on and so forth. And Mean Gene was kind of, trying to pick the brain, if you will, of Ric Flair and how he felt, going into that match, on that night against Vader, to, try to win the World Heavyweight Championship and beat Vader. So throughout the entire duration of the show, a lot of the show was highlighted around that main event between Flair and Vader. I would say a good hour and a half of the show. Meanwhile, the show is only about 2 hours and 40 minutes. So you can you see where I'm going with this, where, pretty much the entire Starrcade show was all about Flair and Vader. Now, it was a great main event, and I'll get to that in a minute. The card itself, though, it was very lackluster, man, and I'll give you a couple examples. The second match on this card, now I get it, there's mid-card matches, I get it. The second match on this card was Shockmaster versus Awesome Kong. Horrible. Absolutely horrible match. I don't even think the Shockmaster even had a clear-cut finish throughout his duration in WCW, which was not that long. I mean, in this match, he literally hit a scoop slam on Awesome Kong. Awesome Kong landed on the mat. Shockmaster went for the cover and got, the pinfall. That was it. And it wasn't like... Now, I mean, some people were like, well, who the hell is the Shockmaster? Again, don't blame you. He didn't last long in WCW, and he's more known for that awful interview or promo that he had, or segment, if you will, where he fell through that wall and completely just fell. It was atrocious. But a lot of people don't realize that Shockmaster also had a decent career known as the Typhoon when he was wrestling with Earthquake in Natural Disasters. Now, a lot of people are like, there's no way that's the same guy. I'm pretty sure that the Shockmaster is Typhoon from the Natural Disasters. Now, if that is true, then the Natural Disasters was a decent tag team, a force to be reckoned with in the tag team division for WWE back in the day. The Shockmaster gimmick did not last that long at all, and it was horrible. The other matches on this card that, I wasn't too keen on was Rick Rude versus The Boss. I'm not a big fan of Big Boss Man. Rest in peace to the Big Boss Man. But the way they were hyping up, The Boss, especially its first pay-per-view match for WCW in quite a while, I just felt like it wasn't there, man. And Rick Rude, I will give credit where credit's due, man. Rick Rude, his WCW run was incredible and severely underrated. I mean, he won the World Heavyweight Championship. He held that, NWA or WCW International Championship for a couple times, man. And Rick Rude did a hell of a job defending that championship. And I still say to this day, man, he's severely underrated. One of the best Intercontinental Champions of all time. Could have been multi-time world champion. And one of the best heels in the business was Rick Rude. But I felt like Rick Rude was trying to do his best to carry this matchup against the Boss Man, or the Boss, if you will. I just felt like it was lackluster, in my honest opinion. And obviously, like I said earlier, man, the main event. Starrcade 93 was pretty much all about Flair and Vader. That's pretty much what the entire show was built around, was the championship match between Vader and Flair. Like I stated earlier, man, for a good hour and a half of the show, or at least it felt like an hour and a half, it was Mean Gene Okerlund in a limousine with Ric Flair talking about this upcoming match that Flair was going to have with Vader for the World Championship. And literally when Vader, and Flair came out to the ring, that literally was the highlight of the show. They had a great match. I mean, it was a fantastic match. And, the way, like I said, the way that we're hyping this up, even their prior pay-per-view leading up to Starrcade, Flair was joking around that, just like in Starrcade 83, he beat Harley Race, and it was the Flair for the gold. What makes you think, Flair couldn't have a Flair for the gold again in 93? So that kind of, to me, that kind of resonated with me, like, you know what? Are we going to see Ric Flair beat Vader for the World Championship? And it happened at Starrcade 93. Ric Flair, I mean, people may love Ric Flair. People may hate Ric Flair. But at the end of the day, there's a reason why this man was 16-time World Heavyweight Champion. And he's fought the who. The best of the best, literally. And there's not a person on this planet that can take that away from the Nature Boy Ric Flair. The matches he had with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Harley Race, Dusty Rhodes. I mean, the list goes on, man. Shawn Michaels, Taker. There's a lot of matches that Hogan. The list is endless, man. And, my thing is like I said, when it comes down to it, Starrcade 93 was built around the main event between Flair and Vader. As far as a rating for Starrcade 93, I was really back and forth on really kind of what rating I wanted to give this Starrcade 93 show between a 1 out of 10, man. And honestly, I'm still back and forth on it. But if I had to be honest with y'all, man, and I am, I think Starrcade 93, as far as a rating is concerned, man, I'm going to have to give it a 5. A solid 5 at best. And pretty much the reason why I'm giving it a 5 is based upon the Ric Flair versus Vader match. I thought it was a great match. It told a hell of a story. Flair for the gold, 93, just like he did in 83 against Harley Race. Ironically, Harley Race is sitting ringside with Vader at Starrcade 93, where Flair beats Vader. It was, the story kind of told itself, man. It was a great story. It was a hell of a story to tell. And, Flair, became victorious that night and walked out as the new World Heavyweight Champion. So I'm going to have to give Starrcade 1993 a solid 5 at best, man. But this is my review of WCW Starrcade 1993. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.